everyone, and thank you for joining us here on the Recruitment Roundup podcast, which is brought to you by BMS Performance. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, BMS Performance is a specialist sales and marketing recruitment consultancy. For the last 30 years, we've been helping businesses across the UK recruit for vacancies at every level. So welcome everyone to another episode of the Recruitment Roundup podcast. I am your host, Mike Leather.
And I'm the co-host, Sam Musiarira.
Today, we're joined by a guest, Matt Hodgson. Matt, delighted to have you with us today, and welcome.
Thanks for having me on, guys. First one with both of you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Should be a good conversation. Matt, before we get started, why don't you give a quick intro to what it is that you do at BMS?
Yeah. So BMS lifer. So far, I used to wait tables, and then basically it's the only other job I've ever had after that. So been here for 13 years, or I'm in my 13th year, I should say. And I run our London sales team right now. And I'm actually in a kind of interesting phase at the moment where I'm moving into pioneering a new division for the business. So, senior sales leadership recruitment is something that the business has always done, but with a demand that we've seen and a kind of passion internally to deliver a high quality of service in that area, I'm going to be actually kickstarting a new function of the business for focusing on executive search, so national sales leadership recruitment, which should hopefully play into our chat today quite nicely.
Yeah, excellent, exciting times.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we're going to talk today about the traits of a modern sales leader. So I think I wanted to kick this off by talk about why is it even important for us to be having this conversation about this right now?
It's been a funny few years, and I think if you look at what most sales leaders have been through over the last 3 years, there's been some really unique changes to what they need to deal with. We had post-pandemic economic growth that drove demand in hiring, a fight for talent, drove a real challenge for attracting, in some cases, just anybody to come and work for your business in sales. You saw salary demands accelerating at a rate that nobody living really has ever seen, and that having real impacts on organizations. You had salespeople coming into a business, and if they were joining in late 2020, 2021, maybe even early 2022, they were benefiting from very, very high demand. So you had a cohort of salespeople that were joining and making big money straight away if they were vaguely competent.
Yeah.
And what that did is it created an expectation that those who were a bit longer in the tooth knew wouldn't last. And it also created a challenge for managers to be able to say, well, how do we, if we know that this is going to happen, how do we prime our teams? How do we prime our sales function to be able to operate in a way where this won't last forever? But also, how do we not get too excited and thinking that we can change the world off the back of people really wanting our service right now? Because that demand was never going to last, and it didn't. Mid 2022, early 2023 has been a hell of a lot harder for sales teams, and a lot of the things that we're going to talk to about today, I think, will end up in some ways not feeling revolutionary. They will be us doubling down on what we think are the key traits that have always served a good sales leader, but at the same time, the challenges that people are facing off the back of those turbulent times are making some of these traits manifest themselves in different ways and outsizing some of them in importance.
I think that's absolutely right, though, isn't it, what you've said there in terms of doubling down on what might have been perceived previously as the basics, because we've gone from a boomtown market where, I mean this in the nicest possible way, order takers could absolutely thrive. But then you've come into it's true though, isn't it? But then you're coming into this environment that we've been in for the last 12, 18 months.
Yeah,
which felt more normalised.
Yeah.
So
you know, sorry to cut you off. The funny one I always think as well is, Sam, you might test to this as well, but you know, it's your order takers could thrive.
Yeah.
But then I like to think I worked pretty hard during that time myself as well. But I definitely didn't work as hard as I did over the last year. And I like to think, oh God, if I'd have put in the effort that I did in the last year during those times, I could have retired by now. So
yeah.
It's a really good point, man. And I'm just thinking about, obviously, within my marketplace, some of the, you know, reps that have probably been recruited to do a lot of, you know, medical devices, hospital kind of sales roles. You know, they've gone into that market. A lot of them have, you know, been working from home for the most part, and they actually haven't had access to their customers and, you know, been able to leverage those conversations and really develop. So we're probably looking at, you know, sales teams in the past sort of 2 to 3 year period where they haven't had that full that would have probably existed, you know, 5-10 years, you know, 10 years ago, looking back, right? And that's had, you know, a massive impact in terms of where we are in now, because we're in a normal market. This is what it's like, really, and it's had its challenges. And a lot of, you know, the managers that I'm speaking to have, you know, really found it, you know, quite a difficult year to manage those expectations, but also to, you know, to help these teams, you know, look to grow and develop. So it's been a tough year all around.
I think one of the biggest challenges that certainly faced sales leaders across a multitude of industries is the change in working patterns to hybrid working, remote working, and the knock-on effect on that, and being able to get people up to speed and get them ramping. And that's been really, really tough, especially in new business roles where new business has become just harder, isn't it? BD is just harder in every single industry sector. It is just harder for all the reasons we've spoken about, and I think that's been a real challenge for sales leaders. You know, recruiting, onboarding effectively, getting people ramping. It's been really, really tough because, you know, the expectations of what they might have had on someone coming in were probably not in line with what was actually achievable from in the market that they were working in. They might have been based on what someone could come in and do on, you know, 21, 22, and it did catch quite a lot of sales leaders by surprise, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, Mike. And that point around the remote, the challenges of managing a remote sales function, I think will be something we'll come back to quite a lot. It's something we talk a lot about with sales leaders, and equally the people that are hiring sales leaders as well all the time, because it is one of the big discrepancies that persists off the back of the pandemic. You know, just looking at our data, less than 5% of the jobs that we took briefs for in 2023 so far have offered fully remote working. That's just the stuff that we're doing in our team. But 40% of candidates said that they either wanted or would be open to a fully remote role, and it's a huge discrepancy. You know, it's a huge discrepancy, and it's a real challenge for leaders. And it is something that I'm constantly asked in what we do is, Matt, what advice have you got for me? Because I want people back in, and I want people back in persistently, and I like a bit of home working. You know, I like a day a week. I like, you know, and sorry, this is me using the voice of my sales leaders now, but this is what people say to me. They like it occasionally. They like having a home office, being able to, you know, help the kids every now and again. But their ability to coach, their ability to guide and grow their teams is hampered when those people are operating remotely. It's not impossible. I think we proved that, right? Like, it's not impossible to develop people. But your average to good performers, not you superstars, those are the ones that you've got to invest your time in as a sales leader. And those are the ones that it's really hard to manage remotely. So
it's a new skill, isn't it, though, as well, for sales leaders that might have been an environment where they're in the office with people every day, or they're if the field-based sales leaders, they're spending the majority of the week shadowing the team in meetings, whatever it might be, then putting the processes in place in order to be able to lead, coach, develop, and manage remotely, especially for newer starters, it's quite difficult. I think we often talk, don't we? And we have done on this podcast, and we hear it on a lot of other podcasts about how tough it's been for salespeople in these last 12 months, but we don't talk about, which one of the reasons I'm pleased about this podcast today is how hard it's actually been for sales leaders as well. It's been just as hard because you've had to manage not just people that have had a really great year last year and then they've come into this year and it's been much, much harder. So you've got to manage that whole piece around that and some entitlement wrapped around it too with certain individuals. But you've also got the external pressures too, cost of living, people struggling a little bit more, not quite getting what they have out of the job. So it's not just been about coaching, managing, leading people. It's actually been counselling, supporting them outside of work from an emotional perspective as well, which people will say is a given in sales leadership. But I think it's been more amplified, certainly this year, in my experience. And I'm sure a lot of other sales leaders out there. You guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, Mike. I feel like, even the sales leaders and managers that I've been speaking to now, it's about being more than, just your manager within those typical parameters of, your job, right? You're having to probably look to, go in and, be that supportive, call it a coach or, some parental kind of figure where you're having to have some difficult conversations with people that, just due to times that we're in. And I think that probably takes us into some of the traits that we're probably looking to speak about. I think, Matt, probably dovetailed into you there, in terms of, your thoughts on this. I'm really interested to find out what you think would be, what some of those traits and what you think would be, what have you seen as a modern sales leader?
Yeah, and I was observing there, but all three of us smirked when Mike said the word counsellor, my mum's a counsellor, and I think, well, she's a trained counsellor. She was paid to do it for 30 years, and we all smirked because, we kind of know it's true, but it's kind of a bit outside of our job description. And I think you're right, Mike, and it's a really interesting subject because it's a fine balance. Because one of the things I know that we've all spoken about before is the importance of empathy as a sales leader. You're dealing with a very diverse set of personalities that get into sales these days. Those old school mantras are so out of date now that everybody are these kind of big bravado characters.
People just don't respond to that type of approach, do they? They just don't. They move away from it.
And as a result, empathizing with the differences of your people in your team is absolutely vital. And as a leader, you want to know the intrinsic motivators of your sales team. That's a subject on this podcast from a year or so ago that I was fascinated by, but just hearing people talk about their own intrinsic motivators and you want to know those. You've got to know those as a sales leader because you play to those. So you're getting very close to the personal as a sales leader. But there is a line, and it isn't your job to be a counsellor. And actually, you're doing a disservice to the individual if you overstep the mark and you spend too long managing the emotions that are linked back to those challenges that people are facing. People are hard up. They're not earning the commission checks they were previously. Maybe they're struggling at home. Maybe they've got families that aren't being funded in the same way by the salesperson's overperformance. They're going to be stressed, and then that plays into the challenges that we all face in work. We're all under pressure sometimes. And for some personalities, that can turn into mental health challenges. So as a good sales leader, you got to get close to that line, but you got to not overstep it because it's not your job to counsel these people. And it's very easy to end up over the line, I think.
Matt, just on that, it's a really, really good point that you've raised, I suppose, and I'm thinking about maybe our audience, and have you got maybe like a example they could probably think of, that's probably occurred in yourself and within your role over the past year that you think would be, a great one to potentially share on the back, because you've said some really, really good stuff there as to maybe a difficult conversation or two that you've probably had to have.
I think it may even be best to kind of look outward for me and say, well, what are the things that sales leaders have confided in with me about, and maybe I'm kind of branding myself as a counselor here again, but the good thing about doing what we do, selling to salespeople, is you're sharing in a lot of the same challenges. So I think one of the big things that we come up against, and this isn't specifically one, but it's a conversation I've had a couple of times, is about those those individuals who got into maybe something like an SDR role, so sales development representatives role. And there's a huge cohort of people who got recruited, and they got recruited, I don't know, let's say late 2021, maybe 2022, and they'll have had stints, and they might have joined organizations where they weren't given the room to get up to speed. They weren't in a kind of booming market whereby they could overperform. And you've got young people here. You've got people who are right at the start of their career, learning how to do the craft of sales. And a couple of sales leaders have both had the exact same conversation with me around, these are people that we think are capable of doing the profession of sales, but they're doing it in a really, really challenging time. And we've got a lot of them that are coming to us and saying, do you think I'm cut out for this? Do you think that this is something that I can persist with? And one of those really, really big challenges that people are coming up against now is those early stage hires. They want to become successful. They want to see they hear about all the great numbers that people have been doing within an organization. But how do you as a leader actually help those people to understand that it's a patience game? Your sales is a patience game, and you're going to do it in down markets, and actually your skill set will improve in a down market, or it should do anyway with the right coaching and development. And I think that was the thing that I came back to when I gave my viewpoint to these people was, if you trust in the personalities that you hired, if they're having challenges with whether or not the profession is going to be something that they can actually make a success of, your job as an individual is to continually remind them that it is a patience game. And if you continue with the right behaviours for long enough, then you will see results eventually.
I think that's where the empathy piece is key there, because you're talking there about a sales professional there, and a specific type of sales professional who probably hasn't got that much, if any, experience in selling. Might be at more of a junior stage of the career as well because of that. So then possibly a little bit more emotional as a person, a little bit more reactive because they're not as long in the tooth. They haven't got the experience to know it comes, it ebbs and flows sometimes, doesn't it? In recruitment, in other forms of sales. So as the leader there, being able to demonstrate a degree of emotional intelligence, lead with empathy, show a genuine interest in that person's development, you've got their back type of approach is really important, isn't it? And I think that's where the empathy piece comes in, and helping get the most out of someone, because if they can feel that you're just sincere in what you're saying, that you've got the back, that everything you do is for their benefit, then you're gonna build a stronger level of relationship with them. Because of that, then they're going to trust you more, and hopefully they'll perform to a higher level. That all starts from leading with empathy, I think, opposed to not doing that. And it's a case of, being fairly black and white with someone. Well, you should be doing better. You're not quite where you need to be, and that just has the opposite effect. But there are sales leaders out there like that. We hear all the time in the candidates that we'll interview, you'll speak to, that you'll be talking to about vacancies that you're sending them out to, and generally they're not that unhappy with the business that they work for, unless the products are just really, really poor and there's a problem. But generally they're looking to leave a culture, an environment. They're looking to leave a leadership style, I would say, rather than a business itself.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Mike. And when I think about some of the conversations that I have with, candidates, I think the very first question that I get asked, pretty much 9 times out of 10 is, what's this manager like? What's their managerial style? How do they provide feedback? And 9 times out of 10, people tend to want to leave that when they look at their reasons for actually looking to leave a role. It's usually back down to the person that they're reporting into, the relationships, the typical conversations that they're having on a daily basis. And if it's in an environment where they aren't happy with it, it's all about what gets the best of each individual. And if that isn't aligned, more often 9 times out of 10, these are the people that are, looking to embark and try and find a new challenge within a different organization.
Yeah, and it's absolutely same true for sales leaders as well.
Yeah.
It's the two big things that I get asked straight away. Every sales leader, they want the numbers to be right, of course, okay, but largely speaking, if the numbers are right, then the two things that you're being asked is, what's the opportunity here? And every sales leader, every good sales leader asks that question. What's the opportunity here? I.e., what do they actually want somebody to achieve? How much freedom is there going to be given? What are they expecting us to try and do? How well is this product selling versus what the customers are actually saying about it? Is it great, but it's not being sold in the right way? Well, that's an amazing opportunity for a sales leader to go into. So that's number one, that you always could ask, what is the opportunity here for me? And then another one is the leaders themselves. What are they like? Are they realistic? Have they done this previously? Yeah. Are they fair? Are they going to give me a run at this? Are they going to let me own the decisions, or are they going to be the ones making the decisions that I just have to implement here?
Yeah.
And actually, it's very, very similar to the conversation you just had there, Sam, about what the reps are asking for. They just want that environment that, okay, as a leader, they can shape more, but ultimately it's still a cultural point.
Matt, on the trait of a sales trait that sales leader should be able to hire effectively. What are your thoughts on that as a key trait of what a modern sales leader should have in terms of ability to hire sales, the right type of salespeople, do it in a strategic manner? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's so many of these things that we talk about come back to that, I think, we all have seen companies waste time and ultimately money on getting their hiring processes wrong. There's a company that we talk to and have periodically done a bit of work with in the event space, who hired 25 reps into a 100-person sales team that we dealt with last year, and less than 50% of them are at the stage that they should be 1 year in to their journey.
Right. That's significant,
now,
isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the discussions that we were in with them were we've hired the wrong people, maybe we were using the wrong methods to recruit the people. But for me, it's further back up the funnel. It's what are you actually identifying as the traits and skills? It's not ignore skills, clearly, if we're hiring experienced people, but the traits and skills that you absolutely have to have, and then let's build a list of those that are common across all of our good and excellent performers. Don't just build your hiring strategy around your excellent performers, you build it around your good and excellent performers, clearly not your poor performers. But what are those things that are common across all of those? And then don't go out to market and say that we need people who have all of those. You hire people who tick as many of those traits as you can.
Yeah.
And that fuels stage one. Okay, we've got a role, we're expanding, we want to grow, excellent position to be in. That's part one. Part two is, what are the existing traits and skills that our good and best performers all show? And let's build a job spec around that. So I think coming back to the hiring piece is absolutely vital, because if you can identify those and just focus on looking for those and then be open-minded outside of that, you will solve so many of your hiring challenges. And the trick is, go on, sorry.
Do you think there's merit then in a top modern sales leader always engaging with the market? Like, we'll speak to, what I mean by that is we'll speak to sales leaders, Sam will, I will, you will, I'm sure, who'll say, yeah, I know most people in the market, we're always talking to them, keeping them warm. Is that a good thing, sales leaders to be doing, like the top ones? Or
yeah, it takes time. You've got to want to do that, because there's 101 things you could be doing instead of that. Definitely.
I agree. Yeah.
But I would say your hiring strategy is at the heart of what you've got to do as a sales leader. Doesn't take a genius to draw the analogy with sports there, but any good sales team, the manager wants to get the people that play their style of football, respond to their kind of man management, fit their culture, and all of those things are true of a sales team as well. So and if you want to be able to activate and hit those kind of markers when you actually need to hire, okay, great, you can come to a company like BMS and say, I need your help. Or you can get an ad out on LinkedIn and hope that it works well for you. If you've got your own little pool of talent of people that you know already, you're gonna save your time. There's a couple of sales managers I've met who do that. They always stay open to meeting and having a chat with people. They're engaged
I've seen that as
digitally.
well,
Yeah. Those people that are engaged digitally. Old colleague of mine runs a SaaS business now. Well, boss actually runs a SaaS business now, and they're so active on LinkedIn, posting every day, but really valuable, rich sales related content. Him and this co-founder, day in, day out, sharing things that are hyper relevant to their marketplace. But they've shared it. It's a bit of a humble, not so humble, but it's a bit of a brag from them. But they share some of the in-mails that they get from people saying, "Hey, I know you might not be hiring at the moment, but I love what you share. Would love to have a chat with you if anything comes up." And it's a great tool to be able to have that. So it's a requirement and an investment of time, and you're probably going to have to drop something to be able to invest time in doing that. But it's a great one if you really care about your team. It's a great thing to be doing, spending your time doing.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I'd like to talk about the traits of being, both process and results driven.
Yeah,
I think these are these are key traits, and they're two different. But finding the right balance is crucial, I think. And if you look at everything we've got at our fingertips now, all the technology, all the data, got more data than we've ever had. And we've got that at BMS. You've got more information at your fingertips, and it's been able to understand what to do with that and how they then form. And I talk about it a lot in this podcast, success metrics that you need to be able to, if you're hitting them, then the byproduct of that is probably going to be good outcomes on successes. So I'm keen to get both of your thoughts on that, on how important these traits are in the modern sales leader and what you think of them.
Sam, I mean, you're hard on the tools day in, day out, and pulling some strong numbers in 2023 when a lot of people aren't. I mean, maybe you're the guy to start us off here.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Mike. It's a really great question. I think ultimately, and I am mad on process. I think, it's drilled within myself, but also it's drilled within what we look to do. But without any process or any structure, there is no way to measure success, right? It's when we break down, obviously, our sales cycle or any person, and that could be within any role that you do. It's important to have a process, really, so that you can always look back to obviously when you're falling down, or you're looking for key behaviors, you're looking for trends and similarities over a period of time, right? So I think that piece is just so key for any sales leader, and that could be when you think about your recruitment process. I've spoken about it from a day-to-day, from a tools perspective, but equally just having a process. And then on the other end of that is the results-driven mindset. We speak about having access to, data within obviously our roles, and having access to statistics, and all those things, all these KPIs and measures are great, but the top sales leaders, the top sales managers, it's all about, having that hunger, that aptitude to want to drive those results day in, day out, year in, year out, really looking to achieve consistent, repeatable success, so falling in love with the process, and being really, really driven to, to want to take, the business forward every single year. Real, be it a trade, it's just real hunger and a real, it's a real something that's within people, really.
I would say this might be a contentious point, right?
Yeah.
But if you've got a sales leader that's purely results driven, right, they're the type of sales leader who will say, as long as the team are hitting target, don't care what they do.
Don't care what's going on.
Right? Because they've set measurable goals and outcomes, and that's what they define success as. The salespeople that work for that person will probably may enjoy it a bit more, may feel they get a bit more of an easy ride, right? The problem with, I think, purely results-driven leadership is if you aren't measuring it and monitoring it, how can you improve it? So when the results stop and you've not been understanding what the process is to get to the results, then it's impossible to know where you need to turn up the dial or where you need to, change. Whereas with, the other side of it, really, really process-driven leadership can ear into the side of micromanagement because you're just constantly focused on the little intricacies where sales is more nuanced than that. You could have someone who's doing 50 calls a day and, getting 10, 12 really good conversations, and someone who's doing 100 calls a day and getting 3, 4. So, there's nuances around it. So I think you've got to find a balance somewhere in the middle. But, I firmly believe that if you do fall in love with the process, like you're saying, Sam, you know what your success metrics are. And as a sales leader, you've clearly identified what the process needs to look like to get the outcome that the sales team needs to deliver. And then managing across both of those, then that generally works better. I don't know what you guys, what you think, Matt, but yeah, just my take on that. I've seen it, and it's a slight thing that gets on my nerves when people say, "Oh, it's it doesn't matter. I don't care what the sales team are doing as long as they're performing." That's not a recipe for long-term success.
Yeah,
because you just not in this environment now. Maybe 2020, 21, 22, like we were talking earlier, you're flying with that attitude because it's all about the results. Because the results are just coming to you. You don't have to work as hard.
Yeah,
I think that's where a lot of these teams and sales leaders struggled because they're just too focused on the results rather than the actual process to get the results.
Yeah, and there's so much to dive into off the back of that was interesting. I mean, firstly, Sam, I mean, you sound like a dream to manage. So that...
no comment.
but I know we're joshing, but it's kind of true, right? Like if you've got a rep who loves their numbers, is powered by the numbers. I can think of a couple of people who I've worked extremely closely with that are exactly like that. And one of them said to me in the interview, I showed them our performance tracker. We got into a conversation. I just thought, this would be useful to show you it. And he goes, this is a bit of me. I love this kind of stuff. And I was like, right, well, you're probably going to get an offer. Let's be honest, mate. Because it's great. Now, not everybody's like that. Okay, by the way, and by the way, you can still hire people that aren't intrinsically or naturally like that, and you can guide them to want to get that. I'd put myself in that category. I was terrible with that sort of stuff originally, and I was
someone, can't you?
Yeah, and I was a bit of a leave me to it, and I'll just get there eventually. And lo and behold, occasionally I did, and occasionally I didn't. And that's the challenge, really. Whereas if you can get people to a point of wanting that data, and then understanding it, and then understanding how that plays into the processes that you enact every single day, that's where you get people. That's where you get that repeatable performance. And as a leader, your MD, your commercial director, your board, whoever's on your back asking you for it, aren't interested in your good months or your bad months. They're interested in your consistently effective months where you're at your number, and most importantly, you can prove you're going to do it again.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, not to do down results driven at all. Results driven is a great place to be, but it's on the balance, I think, with process driven and results driven, like you said, Matt, perfectly, helping people understand the processes that go into getting the outcome, but then celebrating that outcome, but then thinking, right, how can we improve that by 1%? We talk about 1% all the time, don't we? Improving by 1%, 1%, 1%. What else can we do to improve that result further? By then re-looking at the process, where can we change? Where can we up the ante? But you don't always see this in sales leaders. I was at a meeting with a colleague a couple of weeks back, and we were talking with a business who were having problems with the sales team. They had an issue with attrition, but they also had an issue with the amount of business in the pipeline, and that they get to the end of the month and there wasn't a real urgency from the prospects to sign contracts. That's because the service they were selling was free at the front end of it. So for the prospect, they were like, well, it's free anyway, to an extent. So their issue was that when we asked them a question, so what sort of outcomes are you looking for? Well, we're looking for contracts signed. What do you need to get to that, though? Well, we need activity. How much activity? We're not really sure. Now, this is a 50 million turnover company. You would all know their name as well. If I said it, and I won't. but it was quite, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sat in front of a sales director. I'm sure that person's very good in other areas, but they didn't know what the formula to success was, because they were focused only on the results. It was only on the contract signed, but there wasn't a focus on what do we need to do to get there. So I'd seen it play out firsthand, and that was really holding their team back from getting to their number, but also creating an environment of where people were bought into the the mission and what they needed to do daily to get that end result. And it was performance, which had a knock-on effect on people leaving because they weren't happy, and it was all down to this lack of focus on what needed to go in top of the funnel to get out of at the bottom of the funnel.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sorry, Matt, and I wanted to ask you guys a question. I'm probably going to bring it back to the candidate piece a bit, but I don't know how often you guys tend to hear people are like, well, I don't want to be just a number. I feel like I'm just a number in this business. It's such a common trend, and we speak about that results-driven piece that we're speaking about now is, no sales leader, equally no rep wants to feel like that. And it all comes down to if the process, the end goal and the message isn't aligned throughout, and someone's just feeling like, oh, we've just had a good year, it doesn't matter. Equally, no rep or equally no business leader wants to feel like that. I was actually speaking to a business unit head for, quite a large medical device company. If I mention the name, you guys will know them too, but, they've come in and they've done they've been asked to come into the business and do a really great role, be able to, double revenue over the period of sort of 5 years, create a business plan, and they've done all of that. But there's been, significant red tape and challenges from shareholders above, and ultimately all people have cared about is the number. But they've been asked to also have the flexibility to change the culture and the process within the team. So how can you do that when these things aren't aligning? And I'm very big on process and results driven, Mike and Matt, and just on the back of the stuff that you guys have said, I think it's a really, really good trait to to hone in on, because there has to be that balance. It can't just be we've done it and there's no way to look back at how it's done. Everything has to be aligned, in my opinion, for sure.
Yeah, totally agree.
And I sorry, Mike, to cut you off, but I just wanted to briefly say that it'd be remiss of us to not look at the role of tech within a sales organization these days.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting one. Again, it's almost one of those divisive ones whereby there's always a new sales enablement tech out there. There's always something hot that's on the market that's going to drive X customer retention, or it's going to make your salesperson Y more effective in their operation. And you need a sales tech stack that works for your reps to make them work in 2023. It's absolutely the case. And we could do a podcast series probably on sales enablement techs that drive impact. But the thing that I think is really important linked to that conversation, and it was Sam, your words there about reps, not feeling like a number, is you've got to use those tools effectively. And that's a statement of the bleeding obvious, but it's such a common piece of feedback that we get from reps. They say, we've got so many tools that we need to use. We get an onboarding session with a customer success manager from the company. My manager doesn't typically know how it works that well. And we're just putting data into it for the sake of it. And nothing makes a salesperson more frustrated, because as a general rule, a lot of us aren't very motivated to want to spend our whole day updating the system. We want to be talking to customers. We want to be affecting decision making. We want to be driving processes forward, and we want to be closing contracts.
Yeah.
But it is so common for sales leaders to get wooed by the idea of the bright, shiny tool that's going to drive effectiveness in your sales team. And it's great. You can get into those, and you should be buying those, and you should be investing in that toolkit for your business. But get a system that works, and make sure your team know why they are being asked to use it. Because otherwise you're just going to drive frustration in your team.
Yeah, we did a whole podcast on growth mindset, but just to sneak it into this conversation here. So you'll get the sales leaders that'll get the tech stack like that, and they'll be approaching it with a growth mindset and thinking, right, how can I really get to understand this to help my team achieve maximum results and efficiency. And you get other sales leaders that will say, great, it's a weight off my shoulders. That's great. That's going to make them more efficient, book more meetings, close more sales, because we've got this great
Cool.
piece of tech here. Matt, so just on that point there, because I think kind of where we're going with that is, yes, being great with tech, but it's innovation, isn't it? This might be quite a good point to finish on, because I certainly think it's something that the outstanding sales leaders have got over the average sales leaders, in the sense that always thinking, right, what do we need to do differently in terms of our approach to get more out the market? How can we change the access to sales supporting documents, enablement tools, whatever it might be? What can I do effectively to help my sales team? How can I innovate? Like, what's your thoughts on that as a key trait that a modern sales leader needs to have?
And it's a super tempting mindset at the moment. 2023 has been a tough year for a lot of sales reps, like we've referenced a couple of times here. Salesforce survey run in September this year said that of the companies they petitioned, 29% of reps were going to hit quota in 2023.
Wow.
Typically a business, depending upon your sector, might say, right, well, we factor our business around 70% of people hitting their number, maybe 50 at a bottom end, so 50 to 70% of people hitting their number, and then maybe 20 to 30 that will do circa 75% of their number. And then you've got your leftover percentage of people that you either move on to performance improvement or you move out of the business. So we're a huge discrepancy between what we'd normally expect and what this survey suggested we've got this year. And this is what I mean when I say that the temptation is to dive in and try new things, and you've got to innovate. If you've got an underperforming team, something needs to change. For me, I think the broad point actually links back to the subject that we briefly already discussed, which was you've got to look at the processes that your team are following before you look at a tool that can improve that part of the process. And actually, I look at it a bit like golf lessons.
Oh, here we go.
Right.
I'm terrible at golf, so you and Sam can take this point.
The golf lessons analogy is, right, golf club marketing is crazy, and the price of some of these bits of kit is outrageous. Okay, but the industry is amazing. They've done an amazing job of convincing everybody that the thing that they need to do to improve their scores and to win competitions is to buy a new driver or is to buy a new putter, when in reality, the best thing a fledgling golfer or a high quality golfer can do is look at what you're doing. Are your drives going more right or are they going more left? Are your putts coming up short or are they going long? And then look at affecting that process first with lessons. Okay, but in the context of a sales leader, with coaching, with training, with advice around performance processes and the things that you're doing every single day. And then once you've done that, look at a driver that's going to actually give you 10 yards further off the tee, or in sales, look at a sales enablement tool like a video platform that will drive extra on top of that. So you've got to go back to the processes first before you start looking at buying the sexy bits of kit. Otherwise, you're going to waste your company's money.
It sounds so obvious, like Matt. We've got to understand our process as to why we are where we are, how we are getting to where we are, where do we want to go, how do we implement a process that will take us there. So if you've got any drivers, I'm always down for a new driver, Matt. Good stuff.
It's a funny one. It's a funny one, but it's definitely true. But there's a lot of sales leaders that love golf. Most of the cars in my local golf club are all what look like company edition BMW 3 Series typically. So most of the time it's sales reps and sales managers playing golf.
Good stuff.
Matt, anything you'd like to get across that we haven't discussed before we finish? I mean, I think we've hit on some really, really good. Traits there and key points. It's probably a podcast that we could talk all day on if we wanted to. But yeah, anything else from you before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we've spoken about so many really interesting subjects. I think for me, I'm probably more interested to reflect on what I thought was the most interesting part of our discussion, and I think the trait of humility as a leader, and the different reasons that's important, whether it be hiring, whether it be onboarding effectively, whether it be around coaching, underperformance, but coaching overperformance as well.
Yeah.
Even if we look at how you deal with your leaders that you're reporting into, the people that are putting pressure on you.
Yeah.
It's nothing new. This has been a trait that would have served excellent sales leaders for tens of years. But for me, that's the one that drives almost everything else. And the ability to be able to be selfless with it, be honest with it, be humble with your successes with it as well. I think if you can prioritize that, that's gonna pay dividends more than anything else.
Yeah, that's a great way to finish.
Lovely
I
way
would
to
say.
finish, man.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming on, Matt. Great conversation.
No, thanks, lads.
Yeah,
it's been great to spend some time with you, and cracking little subject to chat about, definitely.
Yeah.
Cheers, Matt.
100%. Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening and tuning in, and we'll be back with another episode next week. Thank you very much. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Cheers.
So that wraps up another episode of the Recruitment Roundup podcast. Thank you very much for listening to the show, to watching the show. We really appreciate your support. It would be absolutely fantastic if you could give us a rating on Apple, on Spotify, give us a review. Any feedback really, really helps and is massively appreciated. So thank you once again for joining us, and we will hopefully see you again next week.